Chapter 2, Chemistry of Life. We're going to discuss some biochemistry this chapter. Overview of chemical foundation of biology. Living organisms in the world that they live in are subject to the basic laws of chemistry and physics. Biology itself is multidisciplinary. It draws from many different fields in science. Life can be organized into a hierarchy of structural levels, each level giving appearance of emergent properties. 2.1. Matter consists of chemical elements in their pure form, and it also comes in combinations called compounds. We'll talk about molecules later on. Organisms are composed of matter, which means they have mass and take up space, and they're made up of elements, which are simply just atoms of a like kind. When we say you are what you eat, we literally mean the food that you put into your body is broken down into its elemental form and reassembled into the molecules that make you who you are. There are 92 naturally occurring elements. They each have their own unique symbol that come from their Latin and Greek origins. A compound is a substance made of two or more elements in a fixed ratio, meaning it doesn't change. For example, table salt. We know that it's made of sodium and chlorine, and we know that it's a 1-to-1 ratio. For every 1 sodium, there's 1 chlorine. So sodium is a reactive alkali metal. We find that on the left-hand side of the periodic table. And chlorine is a very reactive corrosive gas on the opposite side of the periodic table. So when they get together, they form a very strong bond. We call that bond an ionic bond. We'll talk about those later on in the chapter. There are 25 chemical elements essential for life. 4 of those elements make up 96% of living things. So you can see over here we have our 25 elements. 4 of them make up 96%. Carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen are those big 4. The remaining 4% is made up of phosphorus, sulfur, calcium, and potassium. There are also trace elements that are needed by some species, some that are needed just by plants, and some that are needed just by humans. For example, humans need 0.15 milligrams of iodine for their thyroid. If they have a deficiency of that, they develop what's called a goiter, which is that giant mass-like thing around your neck that you see pictures of. So you may notice we're doing a little something different in this chapter. These are called Cornell notes, where you take the notes in the body here, and then you come back and you add main ideas or pictures to kind of help you remember things. At the bottom, we're going to summarize what this whole page is about. Biology is based in chemistry, and we have to understand atoms, molecules, and compounds in order to understand their interactions with our living things. Next, we're going to use our periodic table to help us with exercise 1. It asks us to write the chemical symbol for each of the following elements and state whether it's one of the 4 elements used by living things in large amounts, whether it's used in moderate amounts, or whether it's a trace element required in small amounts. So the first one is magnesium, and our symbol for magnesium is an Mg. It's always a capital letter and a lowercase letter. The amount that it's needed is going to be a medium amount, a moderate amount. The next one is oxygen. This one's simple. Its symbol is just a big letter O. And you can probably imagine we're going to need oxygen in large quantities. The next is zinc. It's a Zn. And that's one that we need in trace amounts. So we don't need a lot of it, just a little. The next is hydrogen, which is easy again because it's just a big letter H. And you can probably guess that one we need in large quantities. Next is copper, and its symbol is Cu, not Co. And copper is needed in trace amounts. So when you see people wearing copper jewelry, a lot of times doctors recommend they wear some sort of copper jewelry or take a multivitamin because they can absorb that copper through their skin. The next is iodine. Symbol is letter I. And like we just said in our notes, you need those in trace amounts. Number 7 is carbon, just a letter C. And that's one of those big ones that we need. So we need large amounts of carbon because we're carbon-based beings. The next is calcium. And we need calcium in moderate amounts. Your body uses calcium in lots of different ion channels and for bone building. Next is phosphorus, and it's a P. And that one, again, we need in moderate amounts. Now, most of these things you can get through your diet if you eat a healthy diet, but if you live on ramen and Pop-Tarts, you're probably not going to get all those vitamins and minerals you need. So you might have to supplement with a Flintstone. Next, we have a nitrogen. Symbol is N, and that is one that we need in large quantities. The next one is sodium, and it's an Na. So that's one of those that comes from the funny ancient names that it was named after. And we need sodium in moderate amounts. Finally, iron is Fe, and we need that one in trace amounts. Without it, your body can't build the hemoglobin molecule, which carries oxygen through your blood. Next, we have on exercise 2, a compound, which is a substance that contains 2 or more elements in a fixed ratio. Check mark which of the following are elements and which are compounds. You may have to guess on some. So the best way to determine whether it's a compound or an element, if it has more than one capital letter in it, it's a compound. If it only has one capital, then it's a element. So for example, table salt. We know what table salt is. It's NaCl. So we know it's a compound. And then what about calcium? Calcium is an element that we need in moderate amounts up here. Big C, little a. Calcium is an element. Another way, if you can find it on the periodic table over here, then it's probably an element. Water is a compound. Vitamin A. Now that's not something that you're going to find on the periodic table, so it's got to be a compound. Carbon, I see that one on the element list. Sulfur, same thing. Carbon dioxide. Well, carbon and oxygen are both elements, but they're together, so that means it's a compound. DNA, very complex compound. Iodine, another element. And protein, another complex compound. So understanding these basics of what matter is, what an element is, and what a compound is important because the next step we're going to build off of that information.